Benedicite Dominus, and welcome to question 31 of the Secunda Secundae of St. Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica. The topic for this lecture is Beneficence, and I am Dr. Thibault. So we are still in the theological virtue of charity. We are now entering into the exterior acts of charity. If you want to see the interior acts of charity, go to the previous three questions. So exterior acts of charity are starting with beneficence. Now, beneficence simply means doing good to someone, right? This makes it a very easy definition. What is beneficence? A good act, right, towards another human being. Charity is a form of friendship, as we pointed out. So beneficence is doing something good for your friends, right, and your neighbors. St. Thomas says, if you are friends, then you act beneficently towards them, right? This is, you can't say, well, this person's my friend, and then you treat them badly. If the person's your friend, you should do good towards them, right? You should love them, you should show charity to them, and that charity should be external as well as internal in the form of good acts. It leads to intending the good of another, right? It's willing the good of another in external acts, in the real world, right? It's not just having goodwill in your heart, it is putting it into action. Should we do good to all? That's a good question. All right, it seems obvious, but maybe it's not so obvious. St. Thomas says, since the love of charity extends to all, right? Who should we love? Right? Who should we show charity towards? Everyone. So since we should show charity towards everyone, beneficence also should be extended to all, but according to time and place required. Right. So this is a good point, right? So, should we give a loaf of bread to those in need? Yeah, that would be a good act to give a loaf of bread to those in need. Should we give a loaf of bread to those who are very affluent, right? Well, that wouldn't really make any sense because they don't need a loaf of bread. They have a loaf of bread, right? So that wouldn't make sense in terms of the conditions, right? The situation. So it depends on the person and the place and the time. What is a beneficent act, right? Because a beneficent act should be doing something good. If it's not doing something good, it's not useful. It's like getting somebody a computer programming class when they've never used a computer, right? It's not particularly good for them. Right? It depends on the person. Now, how about should we do good things for strangers, right? Well, yes, of course, yes, we should do good things for strangers. It's hard to do good things for people who we don't even know exist, right? It's a bit of the challenge that we have to something like agape, right? This kind of love, right? What does it mean to love some person in the highlands of India that I don't even know the name of the town, I don't know the region, I don't know the person, I couldn't tell you who the person was, but I say I love them. What does that even mean, right? What does that even mean to love someone who I don't even know exists, right? Well, St. Thomas says, well, same thing with beneficence, right? It depends on, you love them to the degree in which you can, right? You show them good to the degree in which you can. It is easier to do this to people closer to us because we can physically see them and we know their name and we know what they need. To somebody much further away, we do what we can, right? That's all we can do is do what we can. To the degree that they are made aware, we are made aware of their existence and aware of their need, and the ability to help in some way is the degree in which we can help, right? We can't help something we don't know, but if we do know and we can, we should, right? How about to sinners? Should we be doing good to sinners, right? Evildoers? And St. Thomas points out, if we can do good to them according to their nature, right, their human nature, then that would be good, right? It would be good. But we don't have to do good in terms of aiding them in their sin. Then our good deeds are actually a cooperation in sin, which would make our deeds sinful. Reminds me of a story of one of my classmates who was a very good guy out in Seattle, Washington. He was worked for, I think it was Microsoft or something like that, made a lot of money, but he was one of these geniuses that didn't really have any interest in the material world. So he made all this money, but he didn't have any interest in the money. He just liked the work. And he was a good Catholic, and he was walking to work every day, and he would see a homeless person, and he'd give him $1 or $2. In one Lent, he gave him $20. He said, I can afford it. Why don't I give him $20? And then when he was walking back from work that day, he saw the ambulances there, and the ambulance was taking the guy away. With the $20, he bought a bottle of alcohol, drank the whole thing in one day, passed out, hit his head on the ground, and then the ambulance had to come bring him to the hospital. And my friend's response was, I don't think I was responsible, but if my goal was to help him, I don't think I did that either, right? And that's a good way of looking at it. He didn't cause the problem, but did he actually help, right? Did what he do solve the person's problem, or try to help the person out? Did he help the person out? In effect, no, right? In effect, no. The same would be true with the sinner, right? You can try to help the person in terms of their need, but if you end up aiding them in their brokenness, you might only lead to further brokenness, right? Further sin. So you just yes, help a sinner, but be careful how, right? The next would be excommunicated. Should we help the excommunicated? When you first read this, it sounds like St. Thomas is saying, absolutely not. This is their punishment. We must, we must, not help them. Otherwise, they won't realize their sin, and they won't reform, and they won't. That's the point of excommunication. But then quickly after St. Thomas says this, he starts writing about, but if the person has, an emergency or severe needs of human needs, we should reach out and meet those needs, right? So if the person's starving to death or needs water or food or something like this, we should reach out and get that for them, because if the person dies, they have no chance to come back into communion, right? If they die, then they die in excommunication. The whole point of excommunication is that people do not die in excommunication. The whole point is that people feel the pinch and they reform, and then they are good communicated members of the community, right? A lot of comb in there, right? Community, communicated, right? That's the whole point. And if they die, they can't do that. So we can reach out and take care of the material needs of an excommunicated person who needs it for survival, right? Should we be more beneficent to our friends or to strangers? I love these types of questions because I think our initial thought is typically to love strangers more than our friends, because we believe that we should be more selfless, and that would be more selfless. But St. Thomas in virtue ethics in general doesn't go to the extreme forms of altruism as you might find in deontology or utilitarianism, right? Friendship is a very important piece of Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, virtue ethics. St. Thomas says, grace and virtue imitate the order of nature, which is established by divine wisdom. So what is the order of nature? Well, the order of nature is you like those who are your friends, right? You take care of your family, right? It's very natural for parents to take care of their children. It's very natural for somebody to love their parents. It's very natural to take care of your friends and family and those who live next to you. Somewhat natural to be patriotic, right? To care for your country, to care for your church. These are natural inclinations, right? The order of nature. Well, St. Thomas would follow then that grace builds on nature, right? Virtue builds on nature. It's part of the divine wisdom. Why do parents take care of their children? Why do children love their parents? Why are you good to your friends? This is built into our human nature, right? This is the divine wisdom which God has implanted within our hearts. So we don't have to undo our nature, which is divinely planted, right? So the grace simply builds on it. So just like heat emanates from something that's hot, so our beneficence emanates from ourselves. So naturally speaking, who should we do good for? Well, the people we see every day, right? The people who are in our lives, the people we work with, the people we go to school with, the people we live with, right? These are the most important things, right? We sometimes talk in principles that, sometimes people step over the people in their lives in order to help people on the other side of the world, right? And that's not a good thing, right? You shouldn't be stepping over the people in your life in order to do good to strangers, right? The good actions, the good living starts at home, right? First be good to your spouse and your children and your parents and your family and your community and your church and your country, and then it just keeps extending out. It's not these people and not those people, but it starts with the in and it moves its way out. This is natural, right? This is a natural thing, and it's fine, right? It's fine. So this is good. Now, are there any exceptions to this? Well, yes. St. Thomas points out that our beneficence to others should be weighted depending on conditions according to a prudent man, right? So with prudence, we should consider the conditions and the circumstances. So, if somebody, we're in the midst of the war in the Ukraine, right? So some people are gathering goods in order to send to Poland to help with the refugees, the 2 million refugees at this time in Poland and around the Ukraine. So normally, buying your friend a cup of coffee would be good, but given the circumstances that we're in a war, using that money to buy a 6-pack of socks to donate to the YMCA to send to Poland might be the better option, right? So your friend who you might buy the coffee for would be your natural person who you might give to. However, due to the circumstances, you might want to give to somebody else right now, right? Earthquake in Haiti, right? People are suffering. Right? It might not be in your immediate circle, right? They're not in your sphere. But to go beyond your sphere and to reach out to them because of the earthquake or something like that makes sense, right? Or typically we would take care of our own children first, right? That would be the first step, and then maybe our cousins and nieces and nephews, and it extends outward. But how about if a child is an orphan in another part of the world? Should we care about orphans who are in a dire situation more than we care about the Xbox for our niece or nephew, right? So given the conditions, a prudent person can judge when to break with the common natural order and to do what needs to be done because it is a greater good, right? So I think that makes sense. And it's not that contrary to our nature. I think that's also part of our nature is to, somebody's starving to death. Well, clearly they need it more than I need another shirt or something like this, right? Lastly, is beneficence a special virtue? Now, normally when St. Thomas asks this, 9 times out of 10, the answer is yes, right? Is it a special virtue? Yes. And right off the bat, I typed in beneficence is a special virtue, and then upon reviewing it, well, actually it's not a special virtue. But then again, it is. This is an interesting one. So St. Thomas points out that virtues differ according to their object. So the object here is charity. Beneficence is an act of charity. So is it a special virtue? He says no, it's just the external act of charity. Charity is the virtue. This is the virtue in action. Therefore, it is no different than charity, right? Beneficent. Say, well, what's the difference between beneficence and charity? Beneficence is the external act of charity. Therefore, it's charity, right? It's not different than charity. It is charity. So it's not a special virtue. It's part of the virtue of charity. And then again, on the other hand, in the first article of chapter 31, St. Thomas, at the end of his I Answer That section, writes, "But if good, which one man does another, be considered under some special aspect of good, then beneficence will assume a special character and will belong to some special virtue." Right? So in Article 4, he says, no, it is not a special virtue, but in Article 1, he says, it can belong to a special virtue. So, well, what does he mean? Well, if the good you did, right, because beneficence is doing good for another, exists in a special way, then it might be a special virtue, right? So, an example of that. Right. So let's say you are a soldier and you protect another soldier during a battle, right? Well, now we're talking about something special, right? Military, right? A military good, right? Somebody threw a grenade and you grab the grenade with your bare hands and you throw it away and you save your fellow soldiers, right? So this is a military act of courage. This is a military act of beneficence, right? It's not general. This has never happened to me, right? It's never happened to me. But if I were a soldier and this were a military situation, then this would be a special type of justice in that way. You could also look at it from a type of political good, if it's dealing with politics. Right? President Zelensky, as the president of Ukraine, is acting with particular courage. Therefore, he's showing goodness to his country, but he's doing it in a royal way, right? In a regal way, regal justice, a regal good. When you get to justice, and we go into the different forms of justice, you'll see this, right? This is a particular type of good of a king, right? President. And to act during war, again, a particular type of good. It's not general, right? What Zelensky's doing is not what I can do, right? Because I'm not in his situation, right? It's because it's a special situation. It can be a special virtue, right? So, that said, St. Thomas says, no, it's not, and he also says, yes, it is. So, he usually does that in the same article. This time he did it in the same question, but in two different articles, so that's unusual. So in conclusion, beneficent is an act of charity, right? An act of good. It is doing good for all, but in its own unique way, right? Doing good for somebody who you've never met before will be different than doing good to somebody you do know, right? That's a different sense of doing good. You should show beneficence to your friends and people in your life first, and should emanate out, but sometimes there are special circumstances where you should consider the stranger first or somebody else first. And beneficence is not a special virtue unless, in fact, it is. All right. So that's it for this topic. Next, we get into alms deeds. So if you want to read this question, you can always look in the description where they have the description. It has a link to the Summa there as well. So have a great day.